on the South Bank Show, the former Monty Python animator and now film director, Terry Gilliam. Hello. In 1967, a young cartoonist left America for Britain, where he met up with a group of like-minded writers and performers who were planning a new TV series. That cartoonist was Terry Gilliam, and Monty Python's Flying Circus, the series he helped devise, became one of the most acclaimed TV comedy series ever. Python's success allowed Gilliam to progress from creating animated sequences to directing feature films such as Monty Python and the Holy Grail, The Meaning of Life, Jabberwocky, Time Bandits, and Brazil. With these films, Gilliam earned the reputation for creating a highly inventive, fantastic visual style from scant resources. But this reputation was all but destroyed by the much-publicized, spiraling budgets of his 1989 film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Gilliam's latest film, The Fisher King, which opens in Britain this month, stars Robin Williams and Jeff Bridges in a story about the search for the Holy Grail in present-day New York. It's a film about redemption, not only for the characters within the film, but as some would see it, for Terry Gilliam himself. Francis Dickinson's film examines Terry Gilliam's work by entering his private world at his home in North London.
Okay. South Bank Show, 29,691. Take one, slate one. And welcome to Gilliam's Maison Merveilleuse, Gilliam's House of Marvels. It all happens here. They slither on their belly like reptiles. Anything you want, it's available. Now, enter. The dance. What happened to the dance, girls?
And action, Holly! Oh, magnificent.
You do it.
You did it, actually, yeah. There's a dog in love with the camera. Hello, Bryn. Whoa, 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 whoa. Harry, are you leaving home?
Oh, wait, let's go.
Terry!
God, my life. Terry Gilliam's life. Here it is. I was born in Minneapolis, which is a nice town in Minnesota.
Oh, Captain Planet, fly, Planet. Can you fly? Can you fly? Here we go. You're gonna fly, Captain Planet. Ready?
We lived in the country, and the nice thing about it was that, there was a woods behind the house, there's a cornfield over there, there was a swamp there. In the winters, it'd go to 40 degrees below zero. We had an outdoor toilet. It's the Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn childhood, the kind that you dream about, that Americans actually have. I don't think many of them have it anymore, but I was one of the ones that had it.
That red ball is the earth, Harry.
High school, I sort of floated through. I was always involved in decorating for the senior prom and, building sets. And I ended up with straight A's, and I was valedictorian, and I was king of the senior prom, and I was student body president. It was disgusting. And go to college and turn bad, it seems, because academically I just stopped. My real interest was in all the extracurricular things. I remember my senior year, I was editor of the College Humor magazine, which we had, in our fashion, turned from a beautiful literary poetry and art magazine into this crass thing full of jokes and strange cartoons and just outrageous things. What really set in motion my getting involved with Monty Python was going to New York after college and becoming the assistant editor on a magazine called Help that Harvey Kurtzman, who had created Mad Magazine, was editing. And the two of us did this magazine. And we did these things called fumettis, it's like a cartoon strip, only you use photographs of real people. So it's really like making a movie, except it doesn't move, and it's still pictures. And you've got to get actors, and you have a script, and you go and get locations, and you shoot it. And we're always looking for cheap, out-of-work actors. And John Cleese was in town because Cambridge Circus, which was the Footlights review that really followed on the success of Beyond the Fringe, they had come to New York. And Graham Chapman was in the review, John, Bill Oddie, Gene Hart, David Hatch, Tim Brooke Taylor, Humphrey Barclay, who then went on to produce. I mean, an incredible collection of people were all in this cast. And John, as usual, stood out. And I got him to appear in a photo story about a man who falls in love with his wife's or his daughter's Barbie doll. It has nothing to do with reality or John's life, but he was just an actor, had nothing to do, honest. And so John and I became friends, and after the magazine folded, I went off and hitchhiked around Europe and fell in love with the place. I just thought, here at least is a place that appreciates eccentricity.
This way. This is my room. And it's supposed to be my room. It was designed to sit on top of the house, to separate me from the family. I'm not sure who it's keeping from whom, but we're separate for the moment. And it was a place I always wanted. I always wanted a place that was big, that I could spread out all my work in the style to which I thought people who were successful worked. In fact, I find I do probably less work here than I've done in the little tiny rooms I used to scrabble around in. And little by little, this place has begun to fill up with all the bits and pieces from the films that normally get thrown on the dust heap at the end of the film or end up in some little box under a label that's soon lost. And I started collecting them, I think, from the time of Jabberwocky.
And so I plonked down here. I was doing cartoons for magazines back in the States. I was doing illustrations for the Sunday Times Color magazine and for Queen magazine. I was just running around with my portfolio. I also was an art director of a magazine called The Londoner. But magazine work was beginning to really bore me, and cartooning was beginning to bore me. I wanted to get into television, and I said, John, can you introduce me to somebody that I can do something for in television?
I'll probably get blamed for the death of several rainforests.
Monty Python's a flying circus.
The Python years, the Python experience, the Python ride, I don't know, whatever it is we call it. I'll tell you what was nice about Python was that we didn't actually know what we were doing except pleasing ourselves. And that, I think, is something to remember in life, because we weren't pretending to be knowledgeable about what the public wanted. We didn't seem to be overly concerned about becoming successful in really grandiose terms. We just wanted to make something that made ourselves laugh. And that's what we set out to do. The six of us were the judges. We were it, beginning and end. We were all very critical of each other's stuff, but mine somehow got through it because it seemed to be of a different world. And I could criticize it and say it's a piece of rubbish, but I wouldn't, just because I had to get something in there. And the others wouldn't raise their voice, which I thought was strange. So I was, in that sense, the most alone in the group, which, again, I liked it. It was like being an expatriate within Python. I had left the States, and I was in a group, but I was still on the fringe of the group.
As the horrendous black beast lunged forward, escape for Arthur and his knights seemed hopeless, when suddenly the animator suffered a fatal heart attack. The cartoon peril was no more.
Well, I mean, certainly it was Terry's visual sense was very, very important to Python. But another thing that was actually quite important was really the way he put together his early short films. It actually gave us the key to how Python should be put together. I mean, we didn't want to go into Python with a particularly disciplined format. That was the whole point. It was supposed to be, anarchic and subversive and different, and we could throw in whatever we wanted, but we felt there had to be some kind of shape. And Terry's animation gave a clue to that you could just leap from a severed sketch into another 7 sketch, you put a head onto a different body, a leg onto a different body, which is what Terry was doing.
Continue with a man with a stoat through his head.
He'd ring up and he'd say, I've got this great idea, and this woman comes up and her leg spins round and her nipple turns on, and there's this great radio, and this guy comes down and chops her head off, and this turns up in a block of flats, and that's pulled down. And I say, oh, okay, Terry, I'm just having dinner. I'll call you later. It was very hard to grasp what it was going to be like.
We are not about to allow this sort of smut to be shown on screen.
As far as the style of cartoons, I think what was odd is that people hadn't seen that style on television. There'd been cartoons, but they'd been in the Disney tradition, full animation, or Hanna-Barbera, those were cheap Saturday morning things, but nobody had seen cutout things. And because I was able to use images that were, classic images, like Venus or famous paintings or a bit of Dürer or throw in some Bruegel. It always had a veneer of class about it. It seemed to be probably more intelligent than in fact it really was.
This Bronzino painting is where Python came from. The foot came from Cupid. I used to spend, usually 15, 20 minutes every week in the National Gallery, desperate for ideas, and these paintings would eventually speak to me, and I thought, of everything in this painting, the thing that intrigued me most was Cupid's foot, which we turned into the foot of some strange god that crushes everything when it doesn't go right. This Bruegel is, I think it's the Battle of Carnival and Lent. I mean, Bruegel has always fascinated me because I think if he had been living now, he would have been making films, because his paintings are just full of stories on top of stories on top of stories. They're full of amazing characters. When we did Holy Grail and Jabberwocky, it was really Bruegel that we were trying to put on film. What I love about them, the people are just full of life. They're doing things. They're every kind of, from rich to poor to crippled to healthy. Everything is going on in them, and we just literally stole as many ideas as we could from them. We have no shame at all.
When that's the round table, we dance whenever we're able. We do routine to call the scenes to footwork impeccable. We dine well here in Camelot, we eat ham and jam and spam a lot.
When we came to direct Holy Grail, it was an interesting situation because we were given the money with no strings attached. We could do everything, and Terry Jones and I, ambitious little buggers that we were, just wanted to be film directors. That's all we wanted to be. And so, we said anybody named Terry gets to be film director of this film. And luckily there were two of us. So we set off on this business of trying to direct a film. And it was wonderful because we hadn't done it. And we made a lot of mistakes, but somehow we got through Holy Grail in 5 weeks. And for me, though, it became more and more difficult because I'd been in my little room with my pieces of paper that never talked back, that did exactly what I wanted them to do. And suddenly I was having to confront people like the rest of the group who were very independently minded. And I seemed to have no facility to communicate what I wanted clearly.
And Terry Terry Gilliam believed in the beauty of a shot. He believed there was such a thing as sort of, not a perfect shot, but a shot which used everything, all some natural light and everything to the perfect effect. And so you would find yourself crouched in a trench with a helmet on, waiting for the sun just to catch the top of a helmet. And I think that happened with John Cleese once. John just couldn't understand why this was happening, why it had to be him, why there couldn't be someone holding a helmet up on the end of a stick for the sun to come up. But Terry said, no, it has to be right. You've got to be in there, John. It's just going to look so wonderful. And John was saying, I don't care how fucking wonderful it looks. I've got cramp. I'm miserable. I'm not getting paid very much. I don't see the point.
The Black Knight always triumphs! Haven't you? Come on, then. All right. We'll call it a draw. Come, Patsy. Oh, I see. Running away, eh? You yellow bastards! Come back here and take what's coming to you! I'll bite your legs off!
And then I would get angry because they had written the sketch. I was just communicating it to film somehow, transposing it to film, and they weren't playing the game, and so I would go off in huffs. So in the end, the way we actually worked was that Terry Jones worked with the guys, and I worked with the camera and the technical side of the thing, and that was great. And we got through the film. When I came to do Jabberwocky, which was on my own, it was this wonderful revelation that actors believe in directors, and they respect them and do all the things that the Pythons don't do. And so there I am working with John LeMessurier and Max Wall and Harry Corbett, and if I say lie down in that pile of shit and have more ordure dumped on you, they would do it happily.
There must be a better way of choosing a champion.
That was extraordinary. The one problem I was having, though, is because I storyboarded the films, and I did literally every shot, and because I drew with cartoon proportions, i.e. big heads and small bodies, I was having this terrible time of trying to force these normal-sized human beings into frames that I had constructed. And that was a painful bit for the actors. And as I've gone on, actually no, the next stage I went through was Time Bandits, which I then cast people that looked like my drawings, so they could fit in the frames exactly as I drew them, i.e. these little people. And they were perfect.
Come on! Who is that?
Time Bandits was interesting because I actually just wanted to make a film for all the family. That's how it began. I said, I want to make a film that everybody can go to see, that's intelligent enough for children and exciting enough for adults, that kind of thinking.
It will bring you great danger.
If you look at the top right there, you would have seen a piece of tape hanging off the opening of the wall. It was disastrous, but we couldn't afford to go back and reshoot. And I sat down one weekend, and this thing started pouring out, because I wanted to do a story. This is the way often I work, is I don't have any great idea, except that I wanted to shoot the film from a kid's point of view. So I wanted the camera down low. Okay, but I didn't think a kid could carry the whole film, so I need a gang around him. So we get a gang of little people. Okay, what are these guys? So it builds from that, and then a horse came flying out of the wardrobe at one moment in my brain. So we got that. Okay, and then I started putting these things together, and it's strange how it's like the jigsaw puzzle. The pieces, some of them are lying on the table, some are under the rug. I don't know where they all are, but I can see a couple pieces, and then I started putting this thing together, and I really felt over this one weekend it made itself, and suddenly we're in a story with a kid able to escape into all these different worlds.
Harry? Now remember, you're Mr. Knight, and that's Mr. and Mrs. Dragon over there, and knights kill dragons. So, go and get them, Harry, quick.
Time Bandits is really about meeting his heroes, is what it's about, and being disillusioned by most of them. It's about growing up.
Oh, it's a fierce one, Harry.
We're still in a Python format, sketches. So I can plug in Robin Hood, we can plug in, these things plug in nicely, and we can do nice little sketches.
Oh, no! Get out!
You got it.
That was one of the nice things. When we made Time Bandits, we wrote in the script that the Greek warrior would remove his helmet, revealing himself to be none other than Sean Connery, or an actor of equal but cheaper stature. I mean, surprise, got Sean Connery to do it. It was amazing.
I don't believe the way you killed him.
Yes, but it has to be done sometimes.
Let's throw this on. Brazil was a film that sat around for some years. I mean, like 10 years I've been sort of thinking about this thing. I mean, on a very simple level, it's just very cathartic for me. It's all about my own frustrations and my seeming inability to achieve what I wanted to achieve, and the inability to affect a system which is clearly wrong. The fears of Brazil are not so much that the world is spinning out of control because of the system, because the system is us. And that's what Brazil is really about, is that the system isn't great leaders, great machinating people controlling it all. Like it's each person performing their job as one little cog in this thing. And Sam chooses to stay a little cog, and ultimately he pays the price for that. Now, on the other hand, I also felt that that's the ideal view, that if we all do our bit, the world will become better. Then there's the pessimistic side that says enough of us aren't going to do our bit to make a blind bit of difference, and it's going to just, we're all going to, lemming-like, go over the abyss. And so then it was, how do you escape from that world? And Sam escapes by going insane. I actually started the film with that idea of, can one make a film where the happy ending is a man going insane? Okay, showtime, here you go. Come on. Why don't the machines work for me? Look at that. It's because I'm not pushing the right button, that's why. Play, stop, these are complicated concepts. Flying. What do I say about it? I don't know what to say about the flying, except that it's clearly the obvious dream that most of us have, to be able to be that free. Now, this stuff coming up is really quite extraordinary. Somebody says it's again, cheap sexuality. He sees the girl, he looks down, and things start rising. There's a connection here. I never knew that. I thought it was about the countryside and the peace and beauty of nature being raped by these great man-made structures. It's instant New York is what it was to me. What I love about these shots is this shot right there, everything's falling, and actually my stomach goes every time I see that. It's like, oh God! And you wake up. It's the nightmare come true. That is the flying man from Brazil. Our hero, Sam Lowry, becomes this silver-suited superhero and takes to the air. We use either close-ups of Jonathan, which were about that size, but that would be Jonathan, and the rest of the shots were all done with this model. And this thing is so good, we were able to come in very close on it and still fool the camera. This whole thing was connected by wires to a battery that was then run on a huge track. To make it look the size of a human being, you've got to slow the film down. So we shot it like at 4 or 5 times normal speed. And the operator trying to follow this thing was in a terrible state. Each day we'd set this whole thing up, the clouds would get going, boom, boom, and we'd say action, and he'd go, wham! And this thing would fly through the air, and that was it. And it would take us another hour to set it up again. By the end of the day, you didn't know what you'd achieved, but come next morning, we see the rushes with the film slowed down to the right speed, and it's fantastic. There's this incredibly graceful, soaring, sweeping figure. And that's what we ended up with on film. The films that I do always mirror reality, or reality mirrors the films. The experience of making the film and what the film is about becomes the very world that then the film inhabits immediately afterwards, or even during. And in the case of Brazil, we had a situation where we had 2 distributors, one for, as they say, the world, and the other for North America. The film was released to the world via 20th Century Fox as we made it, no problems. And it came to America, and Universal Pictures saw it, and it was one of those great screenings. It was all brass from Universal. They go into the, it's Alfred Hitchcock Theater in Universal. And at the end of the screening, I avoid these screenings, but I came back, I was in the projection booth at the end, watching the backs of their necks as the lights came up. And you could see the knotted muscles, the tensioning. People were just angry and confused. And they don't like being put in those kind of situations, because they're supposed to have answers. And this is a film that doesn't allow you to have simple answers. And they all came out, and I knew we were in trouble. And what basically happened is that they tried to get me to change the film. They didn't like the ending, primarily. They didn't like the disturbing elements in the film. And contractually, I was supposed to deliver a film of a certain length, and we were over by 11 minutes. Now, a smart director would take 11 minutes out and say, there. But I took 7 minutes out and said, I don't think I can cut any more than that without actually harming the film. I'm not going to harm the film. Which then allowed them to start, well, actually, to say we're not going to release the film like this. it became a stalemate situation, and Arnon Milchan, the producer, said, well, we've got to get lawyers in here, and we've got to deal with this. And I said, no, I can't get lawyers in. They've got all the lawyers in the world. They've got all the money. They don't have to release the film. It's not going to kill them. They can sit on it. And I said, I thought we just had to approach it in a much more personalized way. And so the first thing I did was take a full-page ad out in Variety, which was blank page except for this black border, and then very neatly in the middle said, Dear Sid Sheinberg, he was the head of the company, when are you going to release my film Brazil, signed Terry Gilliam? And eventually what happened was that the LA critics, the reviewers, became very interested in the film, and some had seen it. And they set up a whole series of clandestine screenings of this film around Hollywood in people's homes. And came time to vote at the end of the year for their films, and they realized that in their bylaws, it didn't say that a film actually had to be released to be able to be voted upon. And so they all voted on whether Brazil could be voted upon, and they agreed it could. And then it went out and won Best Picture, Best Direction, and Best Screenplay. And this was announced the night of the premiere of Out of Africa in New York, which was Universal's big film that year. And all the brass were there in their ties and DJs, and they were told that Out of Africa has won nothing, and Brazil, this film that they won't release, has won all these awards. They had to release it. And what was wonderful is that I was getting all these phone calls from people saying, oh, well done, maybe now, the floodgates will open and we'll get our films out, blah, blah, blah. Of course it didn't happen. Just like in Brazil, the system doesn't change. You still escape in your madness, that's all.
From us, Jack. Afraid you're right, Mr. Helpman. He's gone.
What do I have? What else? What else you want to see? Oh, behind you, if you would just look that way, please. This is the big one. This is the Griffin from Munchausen. Robin Williams. I've loved the Munchausen stories since I first read them. And I thought, this is crazy. Here are these stories that for generations have been read all over the world, and yet nobody in this particular generation knows about Baron Munchausen anymore. So I thought, okay, let's reintroduce him to the world. So with all of these things in mind, we set out to make Munchausen. In the original Munchausen stories, they did fly around on the moon on three-headed griffins. And so we didn't have to invent anything. We made the griffin. We actually I love the way certain buzzards looked, and particularly baby buzzards, because they come out all fleshy, and they're truly ugly. They eventually acquire feathers and fluff and everything and look quite passable. But these are sort of based on baby buzzards' heads.
There they are! Oh, are you hungry, my darling? Are you? All right, you take the baron, you take the bold one, and for you, my sweet, the little girl, because you're my favorite. All right, dinner is
You go that way, I'll go this way.
You're the last of your species! Work with me, girls, stand together! No, girls, don't stand up with me now! Mayday! We're going down! Mayday! Sybil! Don't desert me now!
And I realized very quickly, before we even started shooting, a couple months before, I'd bit off more than I could chew, and that we had a system that wasn't functioning properly. I allowed myself to get caught in a situation that was out of my control, where all the earlier films, I did have control of them, but by moving to Italy, giving control to a producer from Germany, all the Axis powers actually teamed up on this one. The Japanese were around. And they I allowed myself to let go, which was interesting because it's often the way, that's what an adventure is really about, is giving up control. Go out and see what happens. You've really got to expose yourself, take a chance. That's what we did on Munchausen, and we got the great adventure of all times, but it's one you just want to do once.
Every film I do, I think except for Fisher King, I've storyboarded. I think it comes from being a cartoonist, and I draw it out so I can actually visualize the film. I also found at the beginning, it was the only way I could actually direct. I would have these shots here, and I could count on knowing that if I got that shot and that shot, the story was complete. And this is the irony of the whole thing about Munchausen going over budget, is that it was completely storyboarded. Every shot was storyboarded. I mean, from this is, big horse's head of the statue with people living inside it to the statue. There was nothing up for anybody's imagination. It was all done on paper, so that there's really no excuse for a thing not being budgeted properly, for insurance companies not realizing the scale of the project and judging accordingly. I don't pretend to be an expert on how much things cost, but I do know, what we're doing.
What's interesting about a film like that is it has its own momentum, because the producer, being mad, he also had his own dreams, and he wanted to be as big as Alexander the Great, Napoleon, and Dino De Laurentiis all in one. And so that's part of the reason how these things happen. His mad dream wanted me to be as big as possible, and we just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Don't catch cold! Au revoir!
There's my dog. He lives here in the house now. He hates films. Alison Steadman rises and continues to rise. Alison can do no wrong. She was wasted in Munchausen, totally, utterly wasted. I got her out to Rome and didn't really have a decent part for her. And there's Jonathan,
You won't get far on hot air.
Miss Saigon, as he's known to his friends. And now we leave the town, where are we? This sequence was actually much longer in my original storyboards. Because originally she fell on and was hung on the cross of a church, which is giving way, which the Italians appreciated the symbolism. But the girl was so brilliant. She was 8.5 years old, and she was like a 35-year-old actress. She was so pro. Sarah Paules. We wouldn't have been able to make the film without her, because she just was there all the time, hitting her marks, knowing her lines.
I'm going with you.
I absolutely, utterly refuse.
A professional actress.
Slow down now.
These kids can be terrifying. I keep ending up working with kids. Getting the balloon across these battlements. That is actually in Spain, this battlement. We actually built it on a cliff top. And what happened the day we shot the battle, there's the shot. That is the shot that we knew the film would continue, because I'd said that morning, if the balloon flies, no matter what happens, no matter what the insurance company does, no matter how many of us they fire, the film will get made. And the balloon did fly at the last ray of sunlight. And literally, it had gone up there, the wind was blowing, we couldn't send it up for all day long. When it did go up, it went backwards, then it went sideways, then it went every which way, but the way it was meant to go. And on the very last take, which is the one we're seeing, the sun came out from behind the clouds. The whole crew went crazy. Peppino Rotunno, who's the cameraman, suddenly pushed the operator out of the way. He was operating. We then went on and grabbed about 5 more shots. The sun was setting. And it's one of those moments that suddenly you realize it's all worthwhile.
That is what I had in mind.
Anyway, the end result of the film is we ended up making a film that is probably nobody else could have made it for that money, I'll bet. Even then, even though we went $20 million over budget, it's still good value for money. It's an amazing film, but at the end of the day, it ended up with Terry Gilliam with his reputation as being this auteur who's uncontrollable, who has no respect for the bottom line, who this fantasist that knows no bounds, irresponsible, and that was a very convenient story to fall into, because it's like, after Brazil, where I was the giant killer, the guy who took on City Hall, the artist against all of this, that was the reputation. And the flip side of that is exactly the Munchausen one. And Hollywood is much happier to know I'm this out-of-control madman than a guy who actually is responsible and all of those. So Hollywood was now happy. They'd got me into a nice box. I was just shattered by the end of it because it was such hard work. I actually felt like Munchausen at the end, except that he came back to life, and I felt, I had been defeated by the whole system. It finally gotten me. It was like I began to think maybe it's I'd suffered from hubris. I'd been Icarus. I'd flown a bit too close to the sun. I hadn't listened to all the sensible people around me, all that, and I paid the price. And then this script turned up one day, and there it was, Fisher King, and it was. At the time, I'd been saying at the end of Munchausen that I really wasn't going to make any more spectacles anymore. I was going to make a really, really small film. In fact, I was going to make a film about a schizophrenic, but only about half his personality. I was going to go that small. And while in that mode, this script turned up, and about 4 people, no special effects. It's contemporary. It was for a Hollywood studio. It was to be done in America. I would only be a hired director. It wasn't a script I wrote. It was all the rules I had ever said I would never break. They were there to be broken, and I broke them.
Hi. Welcome back. How you feeling?
Have I died?
Oh, no. Hey, easy. You want to get up? There you go. Hey, gravity works. Come on. Take it real slow. There you go. Take a few breaths, huh? There you are.
Where am I?
It's my domicile. My humble abode. Mi casa y su casa. Oh, you want something to eat? Because your stomach must be a real tabla rasa after last night. If these are raisins or rat shit, you can't tell sometimes. Yeah. How about a fruit pie? You're right about that one. I was off by a couple of months. Nice to have company. Hi.
Where are my shoes?
What?
Where?
What?
What?
Shh. What is it? Company. What?
It's really about the search for the Holy Grail in the middle of the 20th century in New York City, is what it's about. And the Grail takes many forms. I mean, there's a literal Grail involved in the thing. And it's about rediscovering somebody's humanity. It's almost as simple as that.
You know. They said, you're the one.
We've used the word redemption for Fisher King, and it works on many levels. I mean, just my own personal one, it was by breaking my own rules and going right out to Hollywood, putting my head right in the mouth of, in fact, the same line that made Munchausen. It was the Columbia TriStar Company. I thought, here's the way. You just go out there, you make a film there, you come in on budget, show them you're a good guy, and then maybe they'll give me in the future. And that was part of the reason for doing it. Well, I was actually trying to avoid doing special effects in this film. I was working very hard to make it a film about people. And yet the script demanded a red night, so I set about it. And I wanted the red night to be Perry's nightmare, literally. And the first ideas that started coming was the idea of this boiler room that he lives in. There's all this metal around the place. There's a boiler, there's heat. And I like the idea of having flames belching out of the night. And our first renderings of the night was his metal armor was all ripped and torn. It was kind of like the images you see of World War II tanks and fighter planes that have been sunk in the South Pacific, and coral has begun to grow on them, and they've ripped apart and they're rusting, and that was what I was after. And yet at the same time, it had to be a medieval night, so there's a sense of Perry's medieval knowledge. We put this terrible armor on the horse with a huge horn on its nose, which again confuses it as to what is this thing. And then what we did after shooting hours on it, we ended up cutting it almost all out of the film, so there's only a few little glimpses of it, because the less you see, it turns out the more powerful the thing is, and that's how we left it. I don't think in Fisher King I could have pushed the fantasy much further. It had to be based in reality, and because it's primarily that, and you've just luckily got one character who's mad in the midst of it, who can then open the doors of perception to other people. And I mean, we were doing it that way. I mean, going around seeing New York through Perry's eyes. That's the Robin Williams character. And luckily, I'm him, so it's really easy. I can just walk around because I understand Perry perfectly. The Fisher King myth's about a king who is the Grail, the keeper of the Grail, who suffers a wound and begins to die, and everything dies around him. And it's because of what he's become, and he's redeemed by a fool, and that's what the Fisher King film is about. And again, that's what I feel about the style of filmmaking. I mean, in a way, all the technical tricks I've been playing aren't necessary. And just being the simple fool who asks the direct question, it works, and it's really good. The joke about this waltz in Grand Central was that I went to Grand Central to look at what it was like as rush hour developed. I wanted to watch the swarm begin to go. And I was sitting up high above it watching it. And what's wonderful about Grand Central is as 5 o'clock approaches, the tempo increases. More and more people come in, and they're all beginning to move faster. And suddenly went bing. I said, wouldn't it be wonderful? All of them just suddenly paired up and started a waltz for one great moment, and then off to the trains. And I said it more as just a spontaneous little thing. And the producer said, what a wonderful idea. And I said, well, of course, we won't be doing that. And they said, no, it's good. And bingo, it was in the script. And we then proceeded. I think they were being fairly naive about how difficult this was going to be, because getting a hold of Grand Central Station, closing it down, getting 1,000 people in there to waltz is not easy. There are shots in there of Robin waiting for Lydia, which are literally grabbed as the first train is arriving. And real people are beginning to come in there. The crew is walking past. Anybody who was there, just keep moving. Robin, get in there. Just stand there for a bit. Look lost. Look for your love. Ah, that's it. Do it again. Come on, quick. I just love the idea of Perry being so in love that the world changes to whatever dreams he has. And what works so nicely, especially in New York, is that people, it's like a dream they would like to see happen. So it hits on many levels, not just Perry's dreams, but it's their dreams. The idea that for one brief moment, all these rushing, bustling, insular people suddenly make contact. One thing about Fisher King is it's my adult film at last. A mature filmmaker, I think this is the one. I watched the film last Saturday and I thought, God, it's so strong because of these emotional connections. And once you've got those there, you can then do the fantasy around it, and it just spins you even higher. And I think I've got to actually now, in anything I do from now on, is incorporate that kind of emotional complexity to the thing. I don't have to just entertain anymore. I can actually grab people by the throat and say, come in here, this is what it's really like, and people are really can do these things and be these things. And it's I don't know, I think I kind of look back on the others, and after seeing the film on Saturday, I just felt, God, they're pretty lightweight. This one has got some real balls in it.
Anyway.
Are we going?
Yeah.
Oh, we're going.
And cue spontaneity.
What did we do?
You speak
yes.
your life in film.
My
you
life
talk.
in
You talk.
many days in Hollywood.
We learn. Hollywood, long way away. Golden country.
That is the way.
Country.
Keep it long way away.
Keep it long
This
way.
is my theory.
Take money, buy shoes, nice shirts. You talk.
Yes.
We're now dealing with a man's soul here, I think, and the price of it. I think what's so strange is by going to Hollywood and doing Fisher King, you can feel the pressures of them wanting to suck you in because I've now got a Hollywood agent. I've got CAA, the big boys. I thought, if you're going to go to Hollywood, it's about muscle. It's the one advantage I think I have over most British directors, having grown up out there. I've got total contempt for the place, and I know it's a very crude, nasty place. It's not about intelligence and cleverness and talent. It's about brute force. Okay, that was, so I got the muscle. And what happens is that suddenly all those doors are open. Dustin Hoffman is there, Warren Beatty, whoever the stars are, they all want to work with you. The studio wants to give you money. And even on Fisher King at the end, when I was having fights with the studio, they kept saying, Terry, you can't carry on pretending to be an outsider. You can't carry on pretending to be the enfant terrible. You're now part of it. You've done a Hollywood film. You're in the system.
Well, you're all right.
I've sold my soul.
You have.
Yeah.
You who came over to get away from all that. I remember
This
you coming
is-
over
no, I
here
keep
and you
saying-
said, no, I've put that behind me.
And then Britain let me down, is all I can say.
In what way?
It didn't, it didn't love me.
We're giving you a huge house at the top of Highgate Hill that thousands of people want.
But nobody comes to visit me. My friends don't come anymore, so I have to go to Hollywood to find
That's
them.
because you're in Hollywood, or they're on the phone, or faxes come through. I've noticed this gradual drift back towards
faxing?
America.
No, it was a test. I think it was a test to actually dip your toe back in the American water and see if you can survive. All my films have really been statements about America, strangely enough. I mean, if you look closely at them, and if I sit and try to describe them a certain way, they're all me reacting to that country I left. They're seen through the eyes of somebody who lives in Britain and has been affected by this world, but they've all been sort of messages in film cans back to America. They've been disguised with Middle Ages and the 18th century and everything, but it's about that. This one, there's no disguise. That's what's interesting about it. It's there. It's naked. This is the world.
Well, it's very hard because he sort of takes you by surprise each time. And I would say if there's a weakness, it's only that sometimes I feel he doesn't take me by surprise. I feel I've seen things that he's done before. I mean, I would say in Fisher King, just looking around to see he's coming. I've seen Fisher King, for instance, with the image of the horse. There's also the Underbrooken Bridge, the city of the down and outs and the derelicts. I've sort of seen the huddled masses in Time Bandits as well. Now, in everyone else's work, I mean, John Ford made lots of films with people on horseback. Why criticise? It's just with Terry there is such an enormous sort of suffusion of invention that you do notice it when an image is repeated. And I think that maybe that, I would say, is the thing which strikes me sometimes when I see some of the later works as being a repetition and therefore weak, because I know the film before and the film before that.
I think I would have taken your criticisms, if they are in fact criticisms, Mike, because
what criticisms?
I mean, it was a tone. It was a tone. It was creeping.
Just
in,
because I'm not in the film, just because I've been rejected yet again, as I was on Baron Munchausen.
Too busy going around the world becoming famous.
All right, in the cheap films, have soil rubbed in his mouth. Oh yes.
There's a tendency now that, okay, let's say that this film is successful, and America are going to offer me money. There'll be that tendency to say, oh, we'll make more like this. It's easier to make films like this because I don't have to do the same battles. And I hope the perverse side of my nature still is there to rescue me from this, because I think that's what's kept me going, is just sheer perverseness. And because the easy path is that way, I don't do it. I think I'll know when I'm really middle-aged when I go that way the second year. If the next film is an easy film, it's over. He's middle-aged, he's fat, he's a slob, he's given up the battle.